Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about Juno Retrograde. And anyway, well, first, as far as natally, if you have Juno Retrograde in your natal chart, well, you know that Juno is about marriage in a committed relationship and that significant other that can be very sustained. And really, when you have this retrograde, this could be where you might experience a little bit of a delay, perhaps, especially if you have, like, say, planets in your chart that are retrograde as well, like, say, Venus retrograde, and other elements in the chart that may accentuate this. It's not even just perhaps a delay. You might be suppressing and holding back what you feel you need or require in terms of a marriage partner or a significant other. This could be something where you might have difficulty articulating this or saying this to somebody that you feel may be a match for you, and that might be very compatible for you as far as a potential or prospective a marriage partner or significant other goes. Now, some other negatives with this. Now, as far as a woman's chart goes, well, a woman may experience some kind of physical abuse, opprobrious language or behavior. Now, especially, say, if the woman has Mars making an adverse aspect to her Juno, say if it makes a square opposition or even an inconjunct to her natal Juno, this could be a possibility too. There might be some more trials and tribulations in as far as a marriage goes, or a situation with a significant other in the person in a committed relationship may go. There might be certain apprehension or reluctance in terms of approaching that person directly, that they may feel they have that chance of having that committed relationship with as somebody they feel they may potentially marry, that or they may see as a potential or prospective marriage partner or that significant other. Now, the thing about it, so let's take an example. Let's say that somebody has their Juno retrograde in Taurus in the 4th house. Well, the basic interpretation could still be the same. I mean, the person may be looking for, or I should say they need, or may require that marriage partner or significant other that could be very persistent, reliable, dependable, and steadfast, and very dedicated in matters pertaining to the home and family. But if it's retrograde, this person might have difficulty in conveying this, or may have some maybe some delay in terms of maybe getting that person, because they may procrastinate and they might ruminate more about this more than actually act upon acquiring somebody that has those characteristics and fits that mold, so to speak, for what they be looking for as far as a marriage partner or significant other may go. Now, there is one thing that is positive, and is really, there's some silver lining in this, as far as if you have Juno retrograde in your natal chart. Well, you may, a lot of the fact that you might go through a lot of thinking about that marriage partner or significant other that you may require or need, it can give you a better opportunity to perhaps ascertain what that ideal person is for you. And let's say you're in a situation where you're in some kind of strong, stable, and sustained relationship, and you're trying to make sure that this is going to be that right person for you. If you think about it longer, and if you're thinking about it in the right way and analyzing the good aspects and the bad aspects, you could have a better chance of making that right, judicious decision as far as that goes, whether you want to have that marriage and really and go and really have that end, that as far as the relationship goes, hitting that pinnacle in terms of actually marrying the person. Say if you were on the cusp or the cutting edge of marrying that person, you might make that final decision whether to commit or not as far as a possible marriage goes. So those are some things to look at as far as this placement goes. And keep in mind too, that if you have Juno retrograde in your natal chart, it's not like the end of the world. It doesn't mean, okay, I'm definitely not going to marry. It just could indicate that you might procrastinate a little bit in terms of this, and in terms of finding that marriage partner due to a lot of thinking about it and less action, and it's more suppressed, this energy. And you may still communicate to somebody perhaps in an indirect way in terms of what you want, because the retrograde could be about indirect type actions. So you might not be someone that would directly convey what you want in terms of a marriage or significant other, but you might still indirectly do it. And as I was saying about this is not catastrophic if you have Juno retrograde in natal chart. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have Juno retrograde in their natal chart, and they have and they are married and have actually good sustained marriages and really that are very positive and beneficial to them. Remember that Juno can go as far as by progression. If it goes out of retrograde by progression, then it could alleviate some of the negativity connected with the placement, although it won't eradicate everything connected with it in your natal chart. And if you have a lot of good aspects to it, that could help as well. If you have, and even if you have a chart, let's say you have Juno retrograde, and you're looking else in your chart, and say there's your Venus is not well aspected, and there's so many things you feel that are indicative of having a good marriage, or maybe even having one at all. Just remember that you could be helped by progression and by positive transits hitting your Juno. And another thing to look at too, conversely, let's say somebody has Juno that's direct, and they have, and they have a lot of good aspects to it. Well, their Venus might be afflicted, so that could still cause some problems. And if Juno is not well placed, there could be some difficulties as well. As many of you may know, I've said this previously in at least one video, I have Juno in my 12th house in my natal chart. It is direct, but the thing is though, the Juno that I have, it may be direct, but that doesn't give a guarantee or assurance that everything's going to be auspicious for me in terms of my love life and relationships, and even perhaps attaining that significant other, because I have it in the 12th house of restriction. And also, my Venus is afflicted. It does square my Saturn, and the ruler of my 7th house of relationships, of that marriage partner, is actually, I should say one of the rulers, Pluto, is intercepted. So you could do the math on that. So anyway, another thing to look at, as far as, let's say you look at transiting Juno. Now Juno in transit, let's say Juno is retrograde in transit. Now this is interesting because you could be in a scenario or situation, let's say you're in an adverse marriage or a committed relationship or what have you, and this is a time where that marriage might actually reach a culmination or breaking point where you decide, okay, enough is enough. I could see a lot of people finally eradicating that relationship that may have gone on that was really very negative and detrimental to them. Another thing too is, let's say that you are separated from somebody, or or in divorce proceedings or something, and you've been separated from somebody that was a previous significant other. Well, I think when you have a retrograde, remember retrograde is like going back, so you may wind up going back, perhaps trying to reconcile a situation with a significant other or former marriage partner or what have you. So those are some things to look at as far as transits go. Now, let's say you look at it by sign and house placement, how it affects your chart. Now, let's say, for example, somebody's having a Juno. So let's say Juno is in Capricorn retrograde, and it's transiting or traversing your ninth house in your natal chart. Well, this could be perhaps going back to somebody that maybe somebody that you had a very serious perhaps relationship with. Meaning Capricorn could be very serious, maybe even an older partner, and you might be and it might have been somebody from a foreign country, a different ethnicity or culture, or somebody very philosophical, and you might be trying to get back with that person, because remember, Juno's about going. I mean, retrograde activity is about going back. And it could also be about a lot of review. If Juno is in retrograde motion in transit, well, that could be where somebody might be doing a lot of review and a lot of analysis. Well, let's say, for example, that somebody has, let's say that the person has Juno. Let's say Juno is in Virgo in retrograde motion, and it's hitting a person's 8th house of shared resources. Well, you could do the math. There could be a lot of analysis going on, Virgo analysis going on, in review, being retrograde, reviewing things connected with shared resources in the person's marriage. And this person might be strongly evaluating what belongs to who, and what does it and what doesn't, what is actually mine and what's his or hers. And they might be coming to some conclusion, for example, that person, well, these shared resources are like 90% mine and 10% of the other person's. Well, this is not fair or equitable. Keep in mind that Juno, also, want to get back to the natal chart again momentarily, that if you have retrograde Juno in your natal chart, there could be issues about whether your committed relationship or marriage or situation with your significant other or what have you is actually equitable and fair. And you might be constantly thinking and ruminating about this, and there might be some issues connected with this. You might be excessively or incessantly thinking and pondering about the fairness element or aspect of the relationship. Well, anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for Juno retrograde. And stay tuned next time, where I'll be continuing my series on the Juno in the houses placements. 2 things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel, but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, a person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.